I'm gonna start recording because there's a lot of students who are not here, so I'll be able to watch the video later on. Okay, uh, let me, this is the PowerPoint. Okay, here it is. So this is, remember we were talking about this Mr. who's the father of the communism, socialism, Mr. Karl Marx. We were talking about this difference between socialism and communism, and we talk about this guy, the father of the communism. He was, and also we come to a conclusion that is communism is like a socialism, but is an authoritarian socialism. It's an authoritarian, like it says over here, an authoritarian socialism. That's the communism. It's a more extreme form of socialism, guys. Okay, that's the big difference. And also over here in communism, the government is the one who only decides and who is the owner of the all resources. While in the socialism, the government is the owner of the principal, the main or the principal resources, and the rest is for the private sector. Okay, that's the big difference. Now, central planners command economy are make decision for government's own industry. Okay, central planners might also control other sectors, like healthcare, for example, to ensure that everyone has access to this important service. That's a very good quality of the command economy, that they control, they have health programs in order to take care of the whole population. That's, I could say that could be one of the advantages, okay? Now, Karl Marx, economic revolutionary. Marx grew up in the middle class comfort. I thought at the beginning that he was a poor guy, a very low, in a class, very low class. No, he lived in a middle class comfort family. In college, however, he became involved with radical politicals. In time, his political activism led to his exile from his homeland. He was German, I think, yes. He moved from country to country, eventually settling in London, England. During his travel, he met Frederick Engels, era su pasiero. Frederick Engels, the son of a factory owner. Diego González. González just arrived. Diego González. Let's move on. Oops. Okay, now, through Engels, his body, Marx became aware of the struggles of the working class. And he undertook a deep study of economics. He concluded that the Industrial Revolution had created a system of wage slavery. The factory owners make a profit by selling products at a higher price than the cost of labor and other resources. By keeping wage low, salarios bajos, they could make ever greater profit. Puede hacer siempre grandes ganancias. The whole industry system, Marx reasoned, was based on this exploitation of workers. Okay, exploitation of workers. To Marx, rising tensions between workers and owner was inevitable development in economic history. Something that definitely was to happen. Marx, assisted by Engels, su pasiero, laid out these ideas in the Communism Manifesto, Manifesto Comunista. In 1848, Marx discussed his economic idea more fully on his enormous study, Das Kapital. Este es el libro que él hizo, analizando todo lo que sucedía y lo que concluía que debería ser, y lo que iba a concluir, todo lo que iba a terminar, entre estos tres volúmenes. Marx discussed his economy more fully in enormous studies, Das Kapital, which was published in 3 volumes, in 1877 and 1894. Kelly Flores. Wow. Okay, because of the way that communism economies worked in practice and the eventual collapse of communism in the early 1990s, Marx theory have fallen into disfavor. Okay, now let's analyze this country. This is an example of a command economy. North Korea. These are examples of a pure command economy today. The force that have brought changes to traditional economies are also transforming command economies. Only a few countries, Korea, North Korea, for example, still have economies with mostly command elements. Yes, Samaniego to survive. Samaniego. What's the other one? Samaniego and Mola. Oh, yeah, okay, Mola. Okay, Mola, you're back. Okay, let's see what happened in this country. North Korea, once under control of China and later Japan, Korea was split into North Korea and South Korea following World War II. North Korea came under communism control while South Korea is democratic. The government controlled every economic decision. For example, it diverted many of the country's resources to the military. Invirtió todo lo que su economía en lo que era militar y se olvidó del pueblo, metida de pata. Building up an army of more than 1 million soldiers. Y la población era de 20 millones. Imagínense, alimentó a toda esa gente uniformada, no, una locura, metida de pata. Y el pueblo, nada. During the latest 1990s and early 2000, food was so scarce that millions of North Korea died from hunger and malnutrition. Many North Koreans survive only because of food aid from other countries now. The failure to provide foods and other important products was just one result of a flawed economy plan. Yeah. For much of this 1990s, North Korea produced less and less each year and its economy actually shrank. Aquí vemos cómo se movió la economía desde 1990 hasta 2005 más o menos. Todavía está, no ha crecido mucho. Okay. Over here, there's a picture that shows how was a market in the communism system. Now over here, a democratic system or market system, economic system. Okay. Impact of common economies. ¿Cuál fue el impacto? In theory, common economies have some advantages. For example, the sick to provide for everyone, even the sick and all who are no longer productive economically. Okay, ya beneficios para la mayoría, especialmente a la gente mayor y los que están enfermos, algún tipo de enfermedad. In practice, however, the disadvantages of command economy are abundantly clear. To begin with, central planners of command economies often have little understanding of local conditions, no entienden la situación económica de la local. That's why the decision is wrong. Also, workers often have little motive to improve their productivity, since they know that they will pay the same wage regardless of their output. And because there is no private property, there is no motivation for workers to use resources wisely. Only important. Perhaps the greatest failing of strict command system is the great suffering that people living under them endure. Carrying out central planning economic policies requires that individual rights, even the right to live, be subordinated to the needs of the states. Muy malo, muy malo. Millions of people die in the effort to build huge collective farms in China. And so on Soviet Union, millions more were imprisoned for exercising their political or economic rights. Estimates suggest that the deeply flawed policy of command economies are responsible for more death than 2 world wars. Okay, okay. See what's next. Now over here there is assessment, and I think you have already all the questions you need to answer from 1 to 2 4 5. I think. and also 6. I don't remember, but you have the information already in the design documents. Now let's watch the couple of videos that I brought for you to finish all this chapter about the command economies. Let's watch over here. They talk about the difference between communism and socialism. Let's watch.
A surprise, but in the history of the modern world, there has never been a communist country. While a number of countries have described themselves as communist, for example, China and North Korea, by definition, there has never been a true communist country. So, what exactly is communism and how does it relate to socialism? Well, it may be easier to explain what the two have in common. Both ideologies originate from a desire to limit worker exploitation and lower or eliminate the influence of economic classes in society. There are dozens of variations on both communism and socialism based on the different ways these ideologies are implemented in different countries. There's Stalinism, Leninism, Trotskyism, Maoism, and others which are essentially all versions of Marxism, coupled with various styles of revolution. Karl Marx was an economist and philosopher who co-wrote the Communist Manifesto, among other foundational books on communism. In short, his theory centered around the idea that as Europe transitioned from centralized monarchies to quasi-democratic capitalist economies, workers were being exploited by those who owned the means of production. So if you work in a factory or on a farm, as many at the time did, whoever owns the factory or farm is getting more out of the worker than they're putting in. This creates an inherent inequality, giving the owners, who Marx called the bourgeoisie, power over the workers, called the proletariat. In Marxism, to fix this inequality, society must shift towards a model where the proletariat hold this power instead, by collectively controlling the means of production. That's where socialism and communism come into play. According to Marx, socialism is a precursor to communism and the next logical step after capitalism. In socialism, a democratic state controls the means of production, rather than having private companies hold ownership. Instead of competing with each other as in a capitalist society, socialism has workers contribute as much as they can to the greater good, and then they all share equally in that good. Variations of this idea are already popular within capitalist societies in the form of universal healthcare or social services like fire departments and schools funded by taxes. While the use of these services is unequal, everyone is equally responsible for contributing to them based on their ability or level of income. So that's socialism. But once the state controls all the means of production, the next step is total collective ownership, not just of production, but all aspects of society and economy, including private property. The intention of abolishing private property is a classless, moneyless, and stateless society, where everyone works towards the same collective goal of being healthy, happy, and free. Everybody does what they can to contribute and takes only what they need in return. As I said before, there are no true communist countries, and there never have been. Every so-called communist country is actually a socialist country, with the state controlling employment and economy to some degree. Even the widely referred to Communist Russia was actually called the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. In short, socialism and communism are not altogether different. Rather, most schools of economics consider socialism to be a precursor to communism once the state has enough control over society and economy. But this total control is a major reason that socialist countries struggle to reach this ideal. Corruption is rampant in countries like the former USSR, Venezuela, Vietnam, and North Korea, largely due to people in power abusing that power instead of using it to help the society they control, and refusing to give up that power to the people. Nonetheless, socialist ideals have seen incredible success when paired with capitalism in countries like Sweden and Canada. The human hurdle of overcoming power and greed in government is the biggest reason we've never seen a true communist country. So, which countries have been labeled communist, and how do they actually live up to their reputations? Find out in this video to the right. Thanks.
Okay, now this is the last one. Now this one talks only about communism.
Diplomatic relations between Cuba and the United States improve. We wanted to look at the political philosophy behind the long-embargoed nation. Cuba is one of the last communist dictatorships left in the world, and since extreme anti-communist sentiments in the mid-20th century, the philosophy has been a regular fixture in political discussions. So we wanted to know, what exactly is communism? Well, there are a number of overlapping philosophies and socioeconomic systems that can be described as communist in nature. But in the most basic sense, communism is when all manufacturing or means of production are equally owned by all the members of a state. The intended result is to eliminate the capitalist-inspired class system where one class does all the work and the other gets all the money. Although similar ideas have existed both naturally and intentionally since the dawn of time, the most common form of communism comes from the work of German philosophers Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, in what is today known as Marxism. In particular, Marxism is focused on the exploitation of the worker. It's based on the idea that any profit generated by the worker but instead goes to the business owner is a form of inequality and should be abolished. In recent history, several countries, including the USSR, China, Vietnam, and Cuba, have attempted to institute their own versions of communism. However, all can be said to be predominantly socialist and not communist. The biggest difference between the two is that socialism says that all workers should get an equal share in profit and property, while communism says that there shouldn't be money or ownership in general, and everyone should get as much as they need and work as much as they can. Unfortunately, attempts to achieve this political philosophy have led to lower standards of living, government corruption, and in the case of the USSR, total collapse and failure. A number of reasons have been put forth as to why communism hasn't worked out historically. But the strongest criticism of the philosophy is that communism removes the incentive for people to work harder than they absolutely have to. It also leads to resentment of those who work less hard but receive the same. In general, communism is described as being great in theory while disastrous in practice. And the state of the world seems to agree with that assessment. If you'd like to learn more about political theory, make sure you check out these videos on libertarianism.
Okay, guys, that's all for today. I hope you enjoy, and I hope that you have a big picture about what communism, socialism, and the command economy system is. Okay, guys, you have I've tried during these two classes to explain it and try to make you understand there is a difference between socialism and communism. It's not the same thing, even though people talk that it's the same thing. And also the communism doesn't really exist. Okay, doesn't really exist. Not even in Cuba, not even in Russia, never. Not even in Korea, North Korea right now. That's an utopia, that's an utopia, okay? Okay, chicos, entonces esto,